Hello? Hi, how are you? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Oscar Arce. I program the shorts here at the Sonoma International Film Festival. Welcome. Thanks. I cannot believe that we're almost done with the festival. Can you believe it? Have you been having fun? Have you been watching great films? Yeah? Amazing, because guess what? You're about to watch another great film, and one of my personal favorites. So we are here to watch Merchant Ivory. You know, it's a documentary about Ismail Merchant and James Ivory and their production company and all the amazing and beautiful films that they did when they were together, working together. I'm not going to tell you how you're going to feel, but it is a great film with amazing interviews. And this film got pulling together by the amazing director Stephen Soucy, who is right here with us. Could you come in?
Hello, I just wanted to say a couple words. Welcome you all here. Thank you for being here. Want to thank the film festival for programming Merchant Ivory. Things are going well for us on the festival circuit, which is wonderful. But just, amazing to be here and to see you all here in this room and interested in engaging in the film. And just a quick shout out to my distributor, Cohen Media. So we are very fortunate that Cohen acquired the film, and so the film will eventually have its US theatrical release, and then we'll also, I was just in the UK, and we're gonna have the theatrical release there too, but you all get to see it now. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, you'll see why it's one of my favorites. Please turn off your phones. We don't want any interruptions, especially when we have the filmmaker in the house. So don't be rude. Also, this film, as all the films in the program, they're up for the Audience Award. So if you like it, if it was your favorite, just click on the button and vote for it. Of course, thank you to all of our sponsors, especially KHR Family, the McNeely Family Fund, who, without their help, we wouldn't be here or having a film festival. And thank you all. I'll see you later for a Q&A, so stick around. I know you want to see all other movies, but just, you can stay for another 15 minutes and you'll hear more about it from Steven directly from, the source. I'll see you later. Thank you. Enjoy the show. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. The first time that I saw this on the screener's lane, but watching it here on the bigger screen and with the audience, at least for me, it felt way more different, and you see how the audience is, involved with it, which
Sure.
To be honest, it's a skill that you have to get as a filmmaker to get the people involved with your film, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, what was the process of directing this? How long did it take you, and also for how long have you been sort of planning to make this documentary?
Right. So it really started with, I guess I would say my Merchant Ivory journey started with the short animated film that I made. So I made a 5-minute animated film called Rich Atmosphere, the music of Merchant Ivory films. A good friend of mine is Peter Cameron. He's the novelist. He wrote The City of Your Final Destination, which you saw was Merchant Ivory's last film. And so I was introduced to James Ivory through Peter. For me, Merchant Ivory films, one of the big takeaways through the years for me from those films, it was the music. The music, Richard Robbins, his beautiful scores were, I would listen to those CDs over and over and over again. Howard Zahn, Remains of the Day, A Room with a View. I mean, all of them, as we saw, he composed music for, many, many years, many, many projects for Merchant Ivory. And so I felt like Dick Robbins really never got his due. I felt like, everyone talked about James Ivory, Ismail, Ruth, but I was like, Dick was such a key piece piece of the Merchant Ivory, kind of creativity, collaboration. And so James Ivory, recorded the narration for that 5-minute short animated film. He loved the film, and I sensed an opportunity, so I pitched to Jim. I said, you should really let me tell the definitive, or my version of the Merchant Ivory, story. And he agreed. And then once that happened, that's when all the doors opened, and that's when I was able to kind of travel the world, gathering all the interviews that you see there. The bulk of the interviews were, I secured in London, but I also went to, Jim is based in upstate New York and New York City, so I was there. I was in LA, Paris. So yeah, so once I had Jim's blessing, then I was able to embark on the film, and it was about a 3.5-year process, but with the animated film thrown in, I'd say it was probably about 4.5 years of work to do what you all just saw.
Great. That's really impressive, and it's great. It's funny that you mentioned that, because you covered a lot in different areas of the filmmaking and their company, which is, as I mentioned in the film, custom design was one of the biggest things to cinematography, as you say, music. So I wanted to ask you, out of these interviews that you had to do for departments, which one was the hardest to get?
Which interview was the hardest to get? Vanessa Redgrave didn't want to be interviewed, and as I showed a bit there, the other thing to say too is that a documentary film, I have probably 250 hours of footage, and what you just saw was 1 hour and 51 minutes. And so again, you have to make choices. But kind of related to that, what I showed with Vanessa Redgrave there, and how she was making things as difficult as possible for me in the room. I could have chose other things as well, in that interview. But I would say that her interview was the toughest to get. Hugh Grant was also tough. I had to keep going after that. But I would say, you mentioned the costumes and the music, and one of my favorite sequences in the film is when I visited Cosprop, where Jenny Bevan and John Bright. Jenny Bevan is a 3-time Academy Award winning costume designer. She won for A Room with a View, Mad Max, and she just won for Cruella a couple years ago, and they're both just unbelievable talents, and being able, and again, I had so much footage from Cosprop, and I wanted to put more in the film, but again, I have a distributor, they're like, your film needs to be 1 hour and 45 minutes, and I turned it in at 1 hour and 51 minutes, and so, you have to make those choices, but I will say, the thing that I'm probably most excited about for this is that there will be, a DVD and a Blu-ray release of this film, and it's going to be loaded with all kinds of extras, because there was just so much that I wasn't able to fit here. I have Emma Thompson for 27 minutes, not just the 2 minutes that you see in the film, and they all have so much more to talk about and so much more to say about the experience of working with Merchant Ivory. So that's just something that's a little bit on the side. But yeah, we had to work to get people to actually, sit down and meet and, talk about it. But when they did, everybody was really thrilled that they did. And even Vanessa Redgrave, when we finished that interview and my small crew left and it was just her and I together at her home, she was like, oh my God, Stephen, I just love that. That was just so wonderful to go back in time and to relive my Merchant Ivory memories and things like that. So again, sometimes people weren't eager, but then after they did it, they really, thought, they enjoyed it. So
yeah, I bet. And as they mentioned, they all seem to had such a great time, but also such a hard time working with them. So, and sorry, I wanted to ask you, about that. Like, how was it reaching out to James? And you mentioned that you were already like had a relationship like that because of the short, but how easy it was to make those interviews? Because I like the way he sort of, yeah, you asked me this, but I'm gonna answer you this.
Yeah, it's challenging to direct a director. So I would say that first of all, because he had very much in his mind, things that he wanted to address and talk about. But I interviewed him 6 times, and so in that last interview where he's, kind of talking about the details of the kind of interesting triangular relationship of Jim Ismail and Dick Robbins, how I got that footage was his memoir, Solid Ivory, had come out, and so he had put in print a lot of the information and things that I knew about, but I felt like needed to be in the film, but he wasn't willing to go on the record with me on it until the book came out, and then I was able to convince him, that we should talk about it. So there's a lot of, you have to navigate that, but by the time I conducted that last interview with him, which was very long. I mean, it lasted like, I don't know, it was like almost 2 hours long. So again, extra footage, to be screened later. But, he and I had built, like the trust was there. And so I had, by interview number 6, he knew who I was, and we were kind of closer at that point, and he was willing to kind of trust that I would take that footage and take that information and place it in the film in the right way. And he is really, really happy with the film. So
yeah, amazing. Now that you mentioned that, how usually when you're making a documentary, you don't really have a script. You sort of have like an idea and plan of what you want to cover and all that. What was something that caught you by surprise, or something that they said, or that it had an impact on maybe changing the way the story was going?
Yeah, so structure-wise, it was very, very challenging for us to find the structure for this film. You're right, there's no blueprint. It's not a narrative feature. There was no screenplay. But of course, I had an idea of how, kind of out of the gate, how I thought it would piece together. But really, we didn't come upon a structure of pairing each significant, each person with a film until I was interviewing Jim, and he said something like, "Oh, well, Howard Zahn, that was Ruth's film." And when he said that, and he explained why that Howard Zahn was Ruth's film, then the light bulb went off, and I was like, oh, okay, so Dick Robbins, I felt Remains of the Day was really his finest, most polished score. Howard Zahn was Ruth's. Morris, as we saw in the film, really felt like it was James Ivory's film because he was the one who fought to make that film at the time in 1987. Because Ismail negotiated the rights with King's College on A Room with a View, I felt that that film could be paired with him. So taking those 4 most well-known films, pairing them with a person, that's how that came about. So that was a surprise, because when I started making the film, I had no idea how I was going to piece it together. But that was so important for me to figure that out with my editor, John Hart. And I'm like, okay, then everything hangs on these 4 films. And then I was able to kind of chronologically talk about the Indian period, talk about the French films, talk about, the American films, just a bit, so to being able to include those, but not being able to do a deep dive as much as we did with the 4 key films.
Yeah.
And then, surprise, there was plenty of surprises that came along the journey of making the film, being able to kind of rummage through James Ivory's basement in that big house in Claverack and read the letters, from he and Ruth were, corresponded. She was in India, he was in New York City. They wrote letters for years and years and years. And it made me very happy to be able to integrate, those letters when she was working on Howard Zahn. Another kind of thing that was very interesting was there was one film that they were working on where Ruth was not happy with how it was going, and she threatened to pull her name off of the film. And that was like, I mean, Ismail and Jim couldn't believe that she really wanted to pull her name off the screenplay credit for the film. And, you know, so again, there were I mean, that's not in my film, but like there were many discoveries kind of along the way where the relationships and how they ebbed and flowed and how they, you know, the ups and downs, and yeah, I mean, and all of that was just really fascinating to be able to engage with.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you said something about having the key films that you wanted to cover. This is more like a personal question. Which is your favorite James Ivory, Merch Ivory film?
Yeah, so my favorite film has to be The Remains of the Day. I mean, I just really think that was them at the peak. I just think the performances that Jim was able to kind of pull from Anthony Hopkins, Emma Thompson, it really is kind of, you know, it's my favorite. But I would say, as a film that really changed my life, that was Morris. So I saw Morris, you know, on a VHS tape, you know, a cassette tape, in probably 1988, 89, and being a, you know, in the closet gay man living in upstate New York, you know, seeing that film and seeing that story and how, you know, seeing that happy ending from that Ian Forster novel, James Ivory film, that was that was a significant moment in my life. And, you know, and I had seen that, I had seen A Room with a View, and that's when I started following Merchant Ivory and kind of paying attention to the films that they made. So I would say Morris and Remains of the Day are my top two.
Nice. I think Morris is part of a lot of gay men's life. I mean, when I was younger, like a teenager, I remember watching that film and just being like blown away because it was, you know, it was a beautiful love story kind of. And it didn't give you like the usual, the usual showing of gay people and related to AIDS and the stupid stigma and all that. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it stands the test of time, and I mean, I think those performances are amazing, and it's, you know, really wonderful to see Hugh Grant in that film, and but no, I think it's a beautiful film, and I think it really works even, you know, today. So I agree with you.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
So, that was gorgeous.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to make a wild guess that my experience is shared by most people in designers, that this is something we lived through. This is our memory. And yet you brought forth so much more that was surprising, so much more depth about their careers. I'm stunned, but like we're quickly whispering, we gotta see this, we gotta see this. Like the list of films that you were able to touch and remind us, works of art. So my question for you is, since society's moving so fast in terms of film, in terms of this era that was the 90s, 2000s, it's like looking back as we've moved past that. If you have 205 hours of footage, of interviews,
Right.
as a filmmaker, are you against, or are you could you be inspired to get transcripts and make a book, be a companion book that is not limited to an hour and 45 minutes?
Sure. Yeah. So so the question is, would I ever
Do a book.
make a book or, you know, collected, you know, kind of collected transcripts? For sure. I mean, I've thought of that, and I have all of that, and you know, so yeah. So that is something. I mean, once the film's launched, and you know, it is something that I could definitely do, because, again, I mean, there's like my purpose in making this film is I really did this because I wanted to preserve cinema history. I felt like Merchant Ivory, you know, there was really nothing. There were like these random kind of making of each film, right? Or there were some interviews kind of pertaining to each film, but a very kind of featurettes and small things. And so I felt like making this film, I was able to like preserve that Merchant Ivory history. And then I agree with you, as an extension to that, I do have all of these voices, and some of the interviews that I conducted didn't even make it into the film.
Right.
And so there are other people that had voices and, you know, or that had something to say that weren't highlighted here. So yeah, without a doubt, once I have some time, I can put those transcripts together and, you know, and do it.
And you read the letters, and you have your own story
Right.
through it, and
Yeah.
please
Yeah,
read the
thank you.
Truffaut to
Thank
the
you.
Hitchcock
Yeah.
material you have.
No, thank you so much for that. I appreciate
It's
it.
like, and now with all the streaming formats and services that we get, like, did you ever think about doing it like a docu-series?
Well, yes, I thought about it, but I gotta say, I think, Cohen Media, as I mentioned earlier, they're my distributor. It's their film. They will take it from here. I think that'll all depend on like what different outlets are interested in. So if they're able to, so they have a relationship with like TCM, Turner Classic Movies. They have relationships, at PBS. So if some time down the line somebody wanted something expanded, we certainly have the footage to do that. But my gut tells me the film kind of sits, is what it is. And then I really think there will be, like I said, there'll be all kinds of like DVD, Blu-ray extras. There'll be opportunity for people to like engage further, maybe a book of collected transcripts. Because again, when you have 30 minutes of Emma Thompson or great transcripts of Emma Thompson, there's just so much like people can learn here. Those, I really feel this film could be inspiring, to students, like, folks in film school. Like, these Merchant Ivory, they were independent producers. They had to raise the money, film after film after film. There was not some open, bank account that was just there. They really had to build, and that's why they were so fiercely independent. They weren't beholden to the studio system. They chose the projects they wanted to make, they raised the money, and then they only had to answer to, themselves. And to the three of them really. As Jim said, the president, the Congress, and the Supreme Court. That's the way it was set up. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
We have one more. Yeah, you. Sorry.
Hi, I love this.
Thank you.
I
Thank
love
you.
this.
Thank you.
And I've been teaching in a film school in San Francisco for 17 years, and I'm thinking, oh my God.
Oh, great.
My film students would love this. The acting students would just adore listening to these actors talking about their
Awesome.
moments or their subtext or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep.
So 2 questions. One is, did you have very specific, different questions for each actor? How much did you have to write that before each interview? That's one thing. And the other is, did you ever have you on camera and the camera with you and the actors? Because you've got Kim, in that little white corridor upstairs,
Right.
and we don't even see your shoe or your knee. Were you ever part of the mix?
That's a great question. Wait, your first question was, the interview questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time. When Helena Bonham Carter agrees to meet with you, or Vanessa Redgrave, or Emma, or Hugh Grant, so I spent a lot of time composing my questions. Everyone, there was some overlap, I would say, because again, I think one of the things about the Merchant Ivy family is they all went through this, and it was, for a lot of them, very dysfunctional, and so it was almost like they also survived it, right? And so they do have this closeness, these people, which really was brought to light when we were in London last weekend, and 40 people came to the screening of that we had, at the British Film Institute last weekend. And they are tight because they went through this Merchant Ivy process, and some of them went through it again and again, they kept coming back. Because again, these close collaborators work together. But I did spend a lot of time on my questions. There was some definite overlap, especially with the acting side, questions around what was it like being, directed by Jim. And somebody like, Natasha McElhone, who says, oh, I didn't even think he directed. He was just really nice. I just, So again, there was some similarities with some of that, but always there was something I didn't expect, some tangent, something that Hugh Grant talking about going to the Venice Film Festival with Morris and Jim, and he had some great stories about that, you know, that didn't make it into the film. So again, it was wonderful to kind of get, or Vanessa making it very difficult and hating my questions and, you know, yelling at me saying like, these questions suck. You know, like, you know, and then me having that back and forth with her. So for sure, I relied on my questions, but then I was always prepared to like ask new questions that even weren't, you know, kind of given to them ahead of time. And then me, I mean, I did the narration for the film, so I put myself in that way. I think you see me maybe 3 times in the film. At the end, walking down the street with Jim. But no, I didn't want to put myself in it besides just asking the questions off screen. I really wanted the focus to be James Ivory, Merchant Ivory. I had to be there to prompt and to get everyone together to tell this version of the Merchant Ivory story, but I didn't want to put myself like, you know, you know what I mean? Like 2 people in the frame, me and Jim together. I didn't think that was the right way to go. He was front and center.
Well,
Yeah.
literally in your box.
Yeah,
His box
right.
too,
Yeah, in many different
Yeah.
locations, for sure. You know, but thank you so much.
Yeah, I just
Les.
really wanted to thank you. I drove up from San Francisco to see this film.
Well, thank you so much for driving.
And what's happening for me, I just want to get the emotional piece for me. My
Mhm.
father's 97 in New York in a retirement home, and we sat and watched all the Merchant Ivory films.
Mhm.
We didn't know they were gay.
Mhm.
We saw more. My father's like, whoa. It was the most incredible experience for me. That you put this down, I think is phenomenal.
Thank
Because
you.
it started with Sajid Ray for me. I didn't really understand what am I responding to.
Mhm.
There's something about these films, they're so universal, and everyone is being touched in many, many ways for a variety of reasons. So I just want to thank you really.
Thank you.
Just-
Thank you so much. Thank you. I mean,
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you so much for coming from this
Yeah, thank you
studio
all so
here.
much for
It's
being here
really, really
and for
supportive.
staying for the Q&A as well. I really appreciate
Yes,
it.
thank you all for coming. And if you see it out there when it comes out to the public, tell your friends to go see it.
Yes.
All right?